These are the 8 richest families that own Missouri, and the businesses behind their fortunes are absolutely wild. We are talking about a grocery dynasty quietly swallowing other family chains, a man who watched his car get repossessed before building a $20 billion company, and at number 1, you'll see a family controlling the entirety of American rental cars, including Enterprise, National, and Alamo. Let's get into it. Number 8. The Schnuck family. Let's begin with something almost everybody in St. Louis has done without thinking twice. Walking into a Schnucks, grabbing dinner, and handing a little more money to the same family that has been feeding the city since before the Second World War. Their story starts in 1939 when Anna Donovan Schnuck opened a small confectionery in North St. Louis. Her husband Edwin already had a wholesale meat business, and their children soon began opening neighborhood stores of their own. There was no grand corporate master plan at the beginning. It was one family learning that if they could consistently put decent food close to people's homes, the customers would keep coming back every single week. That dependable weekly habit became the foundation of an empire. Schnucks expanded across Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana, and in 1995 the family made the move that effectively settled the grocery war in St. Louis. They bought National Supermarkets, their largest regional rival, and took control of dozens of locations in one sweep. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the competitor across town is not competing anymore because your family owns that store too. But the really interesting move came much later. In 2025, the Schnucks created a new family holding company called the 1939 Group, named after the year Anna opened that first shop. Then, instead of merely adding a few more Schnucks locations, the holding company purchased Festival Foods and Hometown Grocers in Wisconsin. The combined group now owns more than 160 stores across 4 states and employs roughly 19,000 people, while the acquired chains keep their own names and local identities. That is a smart kind of control because customers do not feel as if some giant outsider has invaded their town. The signs stay familiar, the stores keep their personalities, but the ownership quietly moves into the same St. Louis family vault. And here is the question worth asking. When one family owns the store where a region buys milk, meat, medicine, and dinner, are they simply retailers, or are they managing part of the area's basic infrastructure? The Schnucks do not need a glamorous product. They own the weekly routine. The Schnuck family built its power by filling shopping carts. Our next dynasty built theirs by deciding who gets the money to fill an entire city. Number 7. The Kemper family. There are rich families, and then there are families whose name appears on banks, museums, foundations, and university buildings until it begins to feel like part of the city's operating system. In Kansas City, that family is the Kempers. Their banking story stretches back more than a century, and different branches of the bloodline became closely associated with 2 major financial institutions, Commerce Bank and UMB Financial. These are public companies today, so the Kempers do not simply own every share. What makes the dynasty remarkable is that family leadership survived inside both institutions for generation after generation, which is rare in any industry and almost absurd in banking. At UMB, Mariner Kemper became chairman and CEO at only 31. He was the 6th Kemper to lead the company and is described by UMB as a 5th-generation banker. Under his leadership, UMB grew from a Midwestern bank with under $7 billion in assets into a super-regional financial company with more than $70 billion in assets and a presence across 14 states. Another family branch remained deeply tied to Commerce Bank shares. David Kemper led Commerce for decades, and his son John became president and CEO, extending the family's leadership there into a 6th generation. Think about what that means. The family passed bank leadership through depressions, wars, inflation, the 2008 crisis, and the arrival of online banking without disappearing into the history books. An old Commerce story captures their style. During the 1933 banking panic, customers lined up to withdraw savings, and W.T. Kemper reportedly stood among them handing out apples and reassuring people while the bank survived. It sounds almost quaint, but financial dynasties are built on exactly that kind of confidence. Customers must believe the family name will still be there when everybody else is panicking. The Kempers then converted financial influence into cultural permanence through museums, foundations, and major civic institutions across Kansas City and St. Louis. A stock can fall and an executive can retire. But once your name is attached to the city's art and public memory, the dynasty becomes much harder to erase. The Kempers learned how to survive by spreading influence across finance and culture. Our next family made billions by doing almost the opposite, keeping the office boring, the fees low, and the timing absolutely perfect. Number 6. The Riney family. Roger Riney became a billionaire by charging ordinary people $7 at a time, which is a useful reminder that a tiny fee becomes enormous when 3 million customers keep paying it. Riney did not begin as a Wall Street celebrity. After college, he turned down a more prestigious engineering job and joined a Missouri investment company for less money because the markets interested him more. In 1980, he drove from St. Louis to Scottsdale, Arizona, and helped start a discount brokerage that would eventually become Scottrade. 5 years later, he bought out his partner and brought the company firmly under his control. Speaking of betting your career on an idea nobody else rated, there's a program someone on our team has been curious about called the Billionaire Brain Wave. It's a simple 7-minute audio built around theta brainwave research, the deep focus brain state linked to where big creative ideas come from. You put on headphones once a day, usually with your morning coffee, and that's the whole routine. It's a one-time $39, it comes with bonus guides on money habits and investing basics, and there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. So testing it costs you nothing if it's not for you. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to how one quiet Midwesterner blew the doors off finance's most exclusive club. At the time, buying stocks was still wrapped in expensive commissions, intimidating brokers, and the general feeling that investing belonged to wealthy people in suits. Riney saw that computers and later the internet could strip away much of that ceremony. Scottrade pushed inexpensive self-directed trading and eventually became famous for a flat $7 online commission, which made the company feel almost rebellious compared with traditional brokerage houses. The brilliant part was that Riney did not try to look like Wall Street. Scottrade stayed in the St. Louis suburbs, avoided the cost of a Manhattan tower, and built a national financial business from offices that looked almost aggressively ordinary. While competitors spent money performing wealth, Riney spent it on branches, technology, and customer accounts. By the time the business reached its peak, Scottrade had around 3 million customers and roughly $170 billion in client assets. Then came the move that separates a very successful founder from someone with almost suspiciously good timing. In 2017, Riney sold Scottrade to TD Ameritrade in a $4 billion transaction. Soon afterward, the brokerage industry raced towards $0 commissions, and the fee structure that had powered discount brokers began disappearing. Was that luck, foresight, or simply knowing when your own business model had reached its best possible price? Whatever the answer, the family walked away before the ground shifted beneath the industry. Forbes now estimates Roger Riney and his family at about $4.2 billion. There is also a more personal side to the exit. Riney had been diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a form of blood cancer, before the sale, and he later directed major gifts toward research at Washington University in St. Louis. In other words, the business that democratized access to investing ended by financing research into the disease threatening its founder. Riney turned $7 trades into a $4 billion exit. Our next family turned $3 greeting cards into crayons, television networks, and 85 acres of downtown Kansas City. Number 5. The Hall family. J.C. Hall arrived in Kansas City in 1910 as an 18-year-old high school dropout carrying 2 shoeboxes filled with postcards. That is the kind of origin story people usually improve after becoming rich, except Hallmark still tells it because the real version is already perfect. Hall began selling postcards to local stores, but a fire destroyed his inventory and forced him to rethink the business. Instead of continuing to distribute other people's products, he and his brother started printing their own cards, and the company gradually learned how to package human emotion. Birthdays, apologies, romance, grief, Christmas, graduation. Whatever people struggled to say, the Hall family put it on paper and charged a few dollars for the wording. The family kept Hallmark private from the beginning, and that decision became the shield around the fortune. Members of the Hall family still sit on the board today, with founder J.C. Hall's grandsons, Donald Hall Jr. and David Hall, serving as executive chairman and executive vice chairman. Professional managers handle daily operations, but the family has never surrendered the company to public shareholders. That patience allowed Hallmark to expand far beyond greeting cards. The family owns Crayola, so the same private empire that sells adults the words for an anniversary also sells children the crayons used to draw the card. It controls Hallmark Media, including multiple television networks and a streaming service, and it owns Crown Center, an 85-acre complex of offices, hotels, shops, entertainment, and homes surrounding the Kansas City headquarters. Pause on that for a second. J.C. Hall arrived with 2 shoeboxes, and the family eventually became the landlord of an entire district built around its company. The Hallmark Channel may be the cleverest modern move because it turns the emotional calendar into entertainment. Hallmark does not merely sell Christmas cards in December. It spends months producing movies that build the mood, reinforce the brand, and keep millions of viewers inside a Hallmark-controlled emotional universe. It is vertically integrated sentiment. Hallmark still generates billions in annual revenue, employs around 20,000 people, and sells products in more than 100 countries because the Halls understood they were never only selling paper. They were selling the social permission to say something meaningful without finding the words yourself. The Hall family owns the message inside the gift. Our next billionaire figured out how to turn the weekend itself into a retail product, then bought his biggest rival so customers had almost nowhere else to go. Number 4. The Morris family. Johnny Morris started Bass Pro Shops in 1972 with 8 square feet of shelf space in the back of his father's liquor store in Springfield, Missouri. That is barely enough room for a chair and a bad decision. Yet Morris used it to build one of America's largest outdoor empires. He was an obsessive fisherman who believed local customers wanted better tackle than traditional sporting goods stores offered. For the first 13 years, Springfield remained the company's only location, which gave Morris plenty of time to learn exactly what outdoorsmen would drive across a state to buy. When Bass Pro expanded, it did not build normal stores. Morris filled them with giant aquariums, waterfalls, wildlife displays, restaurants, and archery ranges, making the purchase of a fishing rod feel like the beginning of an expedition. That choice became even more valuable when online shopping began destroying conventional retailers. You can order hooks from your phone, but you cannot download a 30-foot waterfall or let your children stare into a tank full of fish through a screen. Morris had turned retail into tourism. Bass Pro and Cabela's locations now attract roughly 200 million visitors a year across around 200 retail and marine centers. Forbes estimates the business generates about $8.1 billion in annual sales and puts Morris's fortune near $8.2 billion. Then came the industry-defining move. In 2017, Bass Pro completed its acquisition of Cabela's in a deal valued at about $5.5 billion when announced. Morris gained stores, catalog heritage, private label products, and one of the strongest names in outdoor retail, effectively joining the 2 giants that had spent decades chasing the same customers. He also moved beyond selling equipment. White River Marine Group became the world's largest builder of fishing and recreational boats by volume, with brands including Tracker, Ranger, Nitro, and Tahoe, while Big Cedar Lodge and other resorts let the company sell the hotel room and the adventure around the gear. That is the real genius. Johnny Morris did not commercialize fishing rods. He commercialized an identity. The customer is buying the version of himself who disappears into the Ozarks every weekend. Morris owns the outdoor lifestyle. Our next man built a larger fortune by quietly making the technology inside corporations and government agencies work. Number 3. The Stewart family. David Stewart once stood in an office parking lot and watched his car get repossessed because the company he had started could not reliably pay him. Today, Forbes estimates his fortune at about $12.4 billion, making him Missouri's richest resident and the wealthiest black person in America. That reversal almost sounds too neat to be real. Stewart grew up poor in a family of 8 children in the segregated South. His father worked as a mechanic, janitor, and trash collector, and the family sometimes watched possessions disappear when bills could not be paid. After college in Missouri, Stewart worked in sales for the railroad industry and FedEx, learning how large organizations buy, move, and manage equipment. In 1990, he and Jim Cavanaugh founded Worldwide Technology in St. Louis. The early company sold computers and printers to telecom and government customers, and Stewart sometimes skipped his own paycheck to keep employees paid. The repossessed car was not a dramatic story added years later. It was a visible sign of how close the business came to failing. What saved WWT was not a flashy consumer app. The company became extraordinarily good at the complicated work behind major technology systems, sourcing equipment, integrating hardware and software, testing huge deployments, managing supply chains, and installing infrastructure for organizations that cannot afford mistakes. While Silicon Valley companies sell the dream of the cloud, WWT helps build the machinery that makes it function. The company now produces about $20 billion in annual revenue, employs roughly 10,000 people, and serves major corporations and the federal government. Stewart remains chairman and majority owner, keeping the largest share of that private company value away from public investors. The empire is still expanding. In 2025, WWT completed a $1.3 billion purchase of SoftChoice, pushing deeper into software, cloud services, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. It was a clear sign that the company is not defending yesterday's business. It is buying its way into the next version of enterprise technology. So which is more powerful? Creating a product every consumer recognizes, or becoming the quiet company that makes everybody else's technology work? Stewart chose the second path, and it made his family richer than any other household in Missouri. The Stewart family owns a major piece of the infrastructure behind modern business. Our number 2 family once owned the beer pipeline, and even after losing the company, its descendants walked away with one of America's largest family fortunes. Number 2. The Bush family. For more than a century, the Bush family did not merely run a brewery in St. Louis. It built one of the most recognizable American dynasties, complete with mansions, Clydesdales, private rail cars, baseball connections, theme parks, and enough family drama to make the beer almost feel secondary. The empire began when Adolphus Busch, a German immigrant, married Lily Anheuser and joined her father's struggling brewery. He understood that making good beer was not enough. The real challenge was getting the same beer across a huge country before it spoiled. Busch embraced pasteurization, refrigerated rail cars, and a national distribution network, turning Budweiser into one of the first truly nationwide beer brands. Then came Prohibition, the kind of event that should have killed the family business completely. The government outlawed the core product, yet Anheuser-Busch survived by selling yeast, malt syrup, soft drinks, ice cream, and a non-alcoholic cereal beverage called Bevo. The family kept factories, workers, and distribution systems alive so that when legal beer returned, the company was ready while countless smaller breweries were already gone. Generation after generation of Bushes then led the company, and the family wrapped itself around St. Louis. It owned the Cardinals for decades, created Grant's Farm as a public attraction, developed the Clydesdales into one of advertising's most valuable symbols, and expanded the brand through Busch Gardens. The message was simple. Budweiser was not just a drink. It was a piece of American identity, and the Busch family were its royal household. But dynasties rarely end because the product stops selling. They end because ownership becomes scattered, management loses unity, and an outsider sees an opening. By 2008, family control had weakened across many descendants, and Belgian-Brazilian brewer InBev launched its takeover. The deal valued Anheuser-Busch at $52 billion, and August Busch IV became the last family member to run the company. To St. Louis, it felt like a civic defeat. The city's most famous corporate family had lost the brewery carrying its name. Financially, however, the descendants received an enormous amount of cash, and Forbes now estimates the wider Busch family fortune at roughly $24.4 billion. That creates a fascinating question. Did the family lose because it no longer controlled the company? Or did it win because the heirs converted a complicated industrial empire into liquid wealth they could divide and invest however they wanted? The answer depends on whether you value control more than money. The Bushes built one of America's greatest brands and eventually sold it. The family at number 1 did the opposite. It kept the business private, passed leadership into a third generation, and now owns 3 rental car brands that most customers assume are competitors. Number 1. The Taylor family. Here is the title payoff, and it is stranger than it sounds. When you compare prices between Enterprise, National, and Alamo, you may feel as if 3 giant rental companies are fighting for your business. In reality, all 3 belong to the Taylor family of St. Louis. The story began in 1957 with Jack Taylor, a decorated Navy pilot who had served aboard the USS Enterprise during the Second World War. He founded Executive Leasing with 1 employee and 7 cars. The company initially focused on long-term leases, but in 1962, Taylor listened to customers who needed temporary vehicles while their own cars were being repaired. So he added a rental division with only 17 vehicles. That small adjustment changed the family's future. The major rental companies were concentrated at airports, where travelers were easy to find and prices could be higher. Taylor went in the other direction, building branches in ordinary neighborhoods and serving people whose cars had broken down, been damaged, or gone into repair shops. These customers were not renting for fun. They needed to get to work, collect their children, and keep life moving. Enterprise strengthened that demand through relationships with insurers, body shops, and dealerships. If an accident created an insurance claim, the company wanted to be the replacement waiting nearby. The famous promise, "We'll pick you up," was not just a friendly slogan. It was the operating system for a neighborhood network competitors had largely ignored. Jack renamed the company Enterprise in 1969 to honor the aircraft carrier on which he had served. His son Andy later took over and expanded it at extraordinary speed, while the family refused to list the business on the stock market. Private ownership allowed the Taylors to plan over decades, keep profits inside the company, and continually reinvest in branches, vehicles, and employees. Then, in 2007, the family completed the empire by acquiring National and Alamo. Enterprise was already dominant away from airports, while the other 2 brands were strong at airport counters. The purchase gave the Taylors the market they had intentionally bypassed during their early rise. The strategy now fits together almost perfectly. Enterprise serves neighborhood customers, insurance replacements, and a broad range of renters. National is positioned toward frequent business travelers, while Alamo is closely associated with vacations and leisure. 3 brands, 3 customer personalities, 1 family collecting the revenue. Today, Jack's granddaughter Chrissy Taylor leads Enterprise Mobility as CEO. The privately held company reports $39 billion in fiscal 2025 revenue, more than 90,000 employees, over 9,500 locations in more than 90 countries and territories, and a global fleet exceeding 2.4 million vehicles. Forbes estimates the Taylor family fortune at about $20 billion. Rental fees are only part of the machine. Enterprise also operates fleet management, truck rental, car sharing, travel services, and used car sales. Each vehicle can earn rental income while in service and later be sold into the used market, which means the family is managing millions of valuable assets rather than simply handing out keys at a counter. And that is why the Taylors sit at number 1. The Bushes sold their defining company. The Taylors kept theirs private, passed leadership into a third generation, and now control brands touching road trips, insurance claims, business travel, and vacations across the world. 7 cars became more than 2.4 million cars. 1 employee became over 90,000 employees. A tiny St. Louis leasing company became Enterprise, National, and Alamo, meaning the Taylor family owns a remarkable share of the choices Americans think they are comparing. And those were the 8 richest families that own Missouri. What stands out is how ordinary most of their products look from the outside. Groceries, bank accounts, greeting cards, fishing gear, technology systems, beer, and rental cars. Yet behind those everyday purchases sit family empires that have survived for generations by staying private, buying rivals, and knowing exactly when not to sell. So which dynasty surprised you the most? Was it the Hall family turning 2 shoeboxes into cards, crayons, television, and real estate? The Stewart family turning a repossessed car into a $20 billion technology empire? Or the Taylor family owning Enterprise, National, and Alamo at the same time? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit the like button if any of these stories caught you off guard, and subscribe to Global Status because we break down the families behind America's biggest empires every single week.